get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes in the importance of
What is that process that a developer, or let's say,
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed?
Hello, GitOps Guide to the Galaxy, which is me, actually. I still have to figure out my new intro now that Christian's gone. Truthfully, the Chris Short one was great. You know, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Like, that one was solid. I'm like, I don't even know how to top that, truthfully. I might just, like, message him and be like, hey, can I just use yours? Can I just steal it?
Exactly.
I'm not as creative. Anyway, thank you folks for joining. Today's episode is the GitOps Guide to SRE, right? For anybody who missed the big news, Christian Hernandez has left Red Hat after nearly 8 years. He's moved on to head up, I think, DevRel at CodeFresh. So now I'm running this show and driving this train, for better or for worse. And so I thought this was a really important episode topic to do as sort of my first solo show. And we have Jonny here from Ask an OpenShift Admin joining me, and I'll let him introduce himself for folks who don't know him real quick.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Jonny. So I'm a co-host on Ask an OpenShift Admin. I'm also a special projects engineer over in Red Hat Engineering, working on validated patterns, which is really just using GitOps and really just GitOps to deploy technology to the edge.
Great, thanks. So, thanks, Waleed. Oh, hey, Christian's in the chat. Hey, Christian. Right. So I've been around for a few episodes. Christian knows me, of course, very, very well. So I think you all kind of took it on his word that I, know something about something. But today's episode, GitOps Guide to SRE, I thought was a really important episode for folks to get to know both me as a host more personally, and how, like, my relation to GitOps a little bit more. What is the word I'm looking for? Language is failing me. But basically, what is the SRE relationship with GitOps, right? Because it's a different perspective. And Jonny, you and I were kind of chatting about this before the show, right? Mm-hmm. Everything that I deal with has to do with long-lived, like long-running things, like production deployments, or actually just supporting GitOps infrastructure. So as we go through today's episode, I'm going to be talking a little bit about those types of things. And Jonny's here basically so that I'm not alone in my fishbowl, so that I have somebody to interact with. He's got a lot of questions queued up to ask me so that we can kind of keep this conversation rolling. There's not a technical demo today. I'm not planning on showing anything particularly interesting. I hope you like staring at my face a lot, because Jonny and I basically have the plan to look at. Or you got options behind me. You can stare back that way.
Or you can imagine what could be on this plain gray wall behind me, which is awesome. Or even better, because you made the fishbowl reference, you could be thinking of the Pink Floyd song "Wish You Were Here." Just so you know.
That's a great one.
If you want Hilliary to sing it, just let me know.
What are we gonna cue up the music and the lyrics? I don't even know if I could sing that one without like studying it. Christian wants your fedora shirt. He should have thought about that before he left. So anyway, if you haven't already, make sure you like, subscribe, and share. The stream is going to be changing a little bit. There's still a couple pre-planned episodes that Christian and I had mapped out that I will continue with. And then from there, as I kind of work through my long-term strategy and direction for this stream, we'll start getting more into GitOps for SREs and GitOps for different types of personas, right? So those are some things that Christian and I had strategized about. I'm just going to kind of probably dive fully into that. Before that, though, we're going to have some really awesome guests. Names are escaping me. We have Pinky is coming back on the stream. She's been here before with Christian. I had a very lively discussion on LinkedIn with Natan Yellen, who is CEO of Robusta.dev. And so he's going to be joining us in a few weeks, July 28th, I think, to talk about his company's open source product offering and, making a startup that does does an open source product as well as, something that they sell, which I think is really cool. As Red Hat, of course, we can really get behind. And then our third guest that I have planned for the minute is Wanya Pranath. And he is a Red Hatter who has written a book called Getting GitOps, which I think is now available. I believe that's currently available. And that's, of course, published through O'Reilly. So that's kind of our guest lineups for the next few weeks or few episodes. Of course, we're still continuing every other week. And then from there, we'll start moving into a kind of, I guess, a slightly new direction, which, like I said, subscribe. I hope you're going to join me for that. And I hope that you'll enjoy it. So that said, today's episode, I was going to kind of let it be a little bit of an Ask Me Anything type of format. If you're curious about SRE at all, it doesn't even have to be how SRE does GitOps. Feel free to ask me those types of questions. Otherwise, I can just really regale you with interesting tidbits about using GitOps within the SRE organization at Red Hat. And I think, Jonny, you actually had some questions for me.
Yeah. So I think that like the whole SRE concept in GitOps is pretty awesome because like we were talking about before the show, like for me, I'll spin up a cluster, I'll deploy an application to that cluster and then call it, right? And there's no real care and feeding or anything like that to it. So I think it's interesting that I think I'm more interested in how like you approach the long-term support of that application. So I know like when you're on Ask an OpenShift Admin, you were saying that there's like this onboarding stuff that you guys do to bring an app onto the managed service and stuff like that. But like, what all does that, like, once you get the application, like what all are you doing to make sure that that thing stays alive? Is it like, are you doing like monitoring and then are you plugging all that stuff in through like Argo? Like how does that kind of work?
Right. Yeah. So the way monitoring and alerting ties into GitOps is a little bit dependent on which SRE team you're looking at. And there's a few reasons for that, right? So a lot of the OpenShift SRE and the layered products on OpenShift SRE group, we're looking after clusters that actually Red Hat doesn't own these, right? These are customer owned OpenShift clusters. So we're not spending their compute. So a lot of the GitOps pieces for deploying managed workloads are done in the back end. And anything, not just managed like the layered products or managed services that we sell, but also just really all of the managed components of OpenShift. OpenShift is opinionated Kubernetes. Those opinions sometimes come in the forms of operators installed on the cluster to make SRE life better. At least in OpenShift dedicated. So understanding that. So we're using GitOps in the SRE realm to make sure that our workloads are deploying and upgrading right to customer infrastructure, but we're not typically running anything on customer infrastructure that we don't absolutely have to. That's not part and parcel for OpenShift dedicated because we don't want to be spending customer compute.
Mm-hmm.
But some other things we control with GitOps is actually like the SRE access, right? How do you manage hundreds of SREs having access with strict RBAC to a fleet of clusters and manage them as a fleet, right? Well, we do that with GitOps. So no, we actually do not use Ansible a lot. Sorry, I just saw that question come in.
I was queuing that one up. So yeah, good.
Yeah, we don't actually use Ansible a lot. My team uses Ansible. And I'll segue into that right quick. So the way my team actually uses Ansible is for chaos engineering. So how do you repeatably train SREs? Well, if you're me, right, you looked to operationalizing that and getting that in as code. You looked to GitOps for that, right? Mm-hmm. So right now at like phase 1 of this project, we're doing something called Combat. I talk about it sometimes. I spoke about this when I went on the Dynatrace Pure Performance podcast a few weeks ago. They had come guested here and then asked me to reverse guest for them. So I did. It was great. So I say a lot. So when we're doing our chaos engineering games, we're basically kind of doing a capture the flag style game, right? We've got 3 teams, red, blue, green, and we stand up a copy of a managed service and standalone infrastructure. So it's not touching any potential production, even including like standing up fresh copies of any interdependencies. So we stand that up. Red team goes in and they get to sabotage it. And so the way that our red team players have actively sabotaged things is all documented. And then we're turning those into Ansible playbooks so that we can repeat successful red team scenarios for new team members who are onboarding. So then you can learn the kind of the way to fix the problem as a new person, without necessarily have to like hope it shows up in production or hope that revisits a live active player scenario. So we're basically whatever we do live in we kind of call them the ad hoc games. Whatever we're doing there gets documented, well written down, and then planned into and gets put into Ansible playbooks. So then yes, we use Ansible playbooks to intentionally break things. Yes, we intentionally break our environment with Ansible. Thank you, Christian. And so we are not only that, we're looking to even take that a step further and turn that into an Ansible operator. To not only go through and break things, but then when dealing with operators, which if you change the state of an application, the operator will revert it back to the expected state. You can actually create an interesting situation of two operators fighting with each other, which is a real thing that can happen, right? So that's how my team uses Ansible. That's a little bit of how we use it today in our long-term strategy for Ansible. And so so other than that, though, we actually are not. We're using a mixture of like GitHub Actions, GitLab, and Jenkins for a lot of our GitOps and CICD. So I'm actually going to go ahead and segue to our Hope 9's question, because it's a really great question, right? So I talked about this, like we'll onboard tenants, right? We onboard these tenants and we say, okay, you must be this tall to ride, in order to have SRE support. And there's a couple common things. The first is they're not doing appropriate disaster planning. Every decision that an SRE makes during an incident is going to be data driven. What do my SLOs tell me I should be prioritizing in this service? What does your service definition tell me that you have promised customers? So in a situation where, real situation, I have persistent volumes are over full, there's really no way to get at them or back them up or whatever. It's a Java application. Heaps are also, overloading. It's nothing is going very, very well at this point in time. And I'm looking at, okay, what am I supposed to prioritize right now? I have SLOs around the service uptime and the service responsiveness, both of which I have alerts for because we're in breach of those objectives, which means we're at risk of breaching our service level agreements, the things we've promised customers, and they pay us on those based on those promises. So I have a service definition that explicitly says we're not responsible for backing up your data. You better do it yourself, right? So I look at these things and I say, well, I have to prioritize based on data, deleting this data and getting the rest of the service restored, right? So you do this, and this was a real scenario, not a real customer. So like we got real. That's very lucky that we caught it in that type of a phase, right? Because these types of things can happen with real customers too. So we do this, and then in the post-mortem of that, which we present to the business unit, they go, oh God, what an oversight. Data continuity is extremely important to this service. It would be better to leave the other parts of the service down as long as the data could be preserved, right? Cool. Now we know that. We learned that lesson through, testing our own software, through having long-lived operational implementations of our software internally, eating our own dog food. So that was very fortunate for us. Another really common mistake is sometimes tenants come to us, and so I'll ask them for things that they're maybe not really thinking about. Log4j is a great example of something unplanned you should plan for, because Log4j happened, and when Log4j happened, Red Hat shut down a lot of things, and some of those things were external facing. And so when we talk to them, and they say, okay, we want to put out this product, and this is the component list for this product. I say, okay, I see a lot of open source upstream components. Do you have maintainers on your team for those components so that you can respond to CVEs? And if the answer is no, they have to go get maintainer status or find someone at Red Hat who is a maintainer who's willing to commit to doing something in case of a CVE, because we have to be able to respond to really critical bugs and really critical security vulnerabilities in upstream software. So those are two things that tenants aren't always necessarily really thinking about, because kind of like you said, they kind of tend to come from a background of ship it and forget it, box products typically.
Mhm.
So running things as a service where you're constantly supposed to be constantly improving it, continuously improving it, even, we'll go with that. So that there's just some of those perspectives that can be missed as teams make that cultural change. And then finally, I'll actually ask them, so what does your CICD look like? What's your upgrade strategy, and how are you making sure you're highly available during upgrades? And I've had the answer be, okay, so well, if SRE goes in and does such and such and such and such, and it's like a 6-step process, then that's how you do an upgrade. And I said, great. SRE is not your sysadmin. We will not be doing your upgrades. You're going to have to go automate that. And we will not take the pager over until you do. So those are kind of the types of really hard conversations I've had to have with tenants,
Mhm.
actually, and say, look, these things are required to be successful running things at scale long term, because I do not know the size of my fleet day to day. It can change. So I need to be able to guarantee certain things that I know make operating fleet, basically, like we said in the OpenShift admin episode, you need to be treating your OSD clusters like cattle, because I am, right? So what allows me to operate my OSD clusters as cattle? One, the fact that all of our services are operator driven, and
Mhm.
two, that we force certain maturity models. We have certain requirements for tenants before they will get SRE support, and that includes they're actually going to spend some time supporting their own software so that they understand the operational realities.
So then, like, so say if I have an application that I'm wanting to, bring onto a managed service, I've gone through the adoption process or the onboarding process and all that, right? And the SRE team at Red Hat said, all right, hey, I'm good to go. Now, if I want to make an upgrade, not an upgrade, but like a enhancement or feature enhancement or whatever, I would still develop that low and then go through. Is there a process that I would have to prove, like essentially prove to you guys that I've gone through these like 5 steps before it goes back up into the production SRE deployment?
Yep. So we have regular syncs with our tenants. So between things like program calls and just like SRE and QE syncs,
Mhm.
where we talk about, like, so those types of things are discussed, and then SRE basically provides consulting and guidance during these synchronization meetings, where we say, yeah, that's not major enough that we're going to care, or yeah, okay, have you thought through how that's going to change? How do we, when we respond to an alert, there should be an SOP, a standard operating procedure. This is a document typically stored in Git that is, it should be copy pastable, right? It's called the 3 a.m. standard. At 3 a.m., when your pager goes off for your service and I'm the SRE responding, I should be able to copy and paste from this SOP and solve the alert. So have you thought about how this is going to change the SOPs? Have you updated the SOPs appropriately? And we also have this in feature JIRAs with the tenant engineering teams, that they adopt a template, and it basically includes all of these checklist items for their features. Are the SOPs updated? Is the documentation updated? Has the SRE team been informed? So typically, they should be able to add features without having to like really go through a whole review process. But when there's this extremely large architectural change that comes up, we typically are involved in the planning of that as well. And again, we use these sync meetings and these program calls to coordinate that planning and coordinate the execution on these really major changes, because they will change the way we operate the software. And we
Mhm.
need to be not just apprised of how that's going to work and understand deeply how that's going to work, but we need to be, handing that over across it. We're a globally distributed team. I'm responsible for, I don't remember, I'd have to count, 10 engineers in 4 geographic regions. As the global technical lead, it's my job to make sure we're all aligned. So these meetings, these things, these opportunities to do that, I'm not the only one that goes to that. That gets spread out across the team, and we have handover procedures for sharing that information across the geographical region so that everybody knows what's going on.
Gotcha. So then, like, once you guys take it on, are you doing like you said, you're using like GitLab CI and GitHub Actions and Jenkins and all that. So I'm assuming you're just hooking that in as a run, and then are you doing like blue green deployments? Or are you canarying it out? Like, how are you using, like, what's the flow to get it out into production after that?
So it depends a little bit on which SRE team you're onboarded with, and what the service is. So typically, obviously, there's a staging, and we have requirement that staging should be very production like, and there'll be a burn in period. So stuff rolls out to the production like staging, and typically it actually uses the production OSD OpenShift dedicated And then there's a burn-in period where it has to run with its burn-in parameters for 24 hours, or potentially more, and without alerting. So during that last kind of phase, like the burn-in phase, that can generate real alerts that will actually raise SRE. So
Okay.
that's a really good like test that we do.
So it's a real smoke test, yeah.
It's a real smoke test, yeah. And so that's how my team does it. The other SRE teams kind of can do some things differently. Blue-green deployments absolutely is one of the strategies. It a little bit depends on the team and the service model as well, because the managed services are not all following the exact same model. So do Red Hat SRE use dedicated project managers for the onboarding process, or do you rotate the responsibility? So it's it's a little bit of both, right? So there's dedicated program managers and project managers that actually belong to the tenant engineering teams. And then we have project managers for the and program managers on the SRE side. So they're interacting together. And then there's typically still one person, one SRE who's been given the responsibility of shepherding the onboarding through. So it's our job. We go in, part of our value add is our SRE consulting, right? So I don't just ask people to throw SLOs and SLIs over the wall at me. My team will sit down with them, or somebody from my team will sit down with them and help them think through what is a good SLO, what is a good SLI. And we'll give that consulting. Yeah.
What's an SLO and an SLI? I think it's service level objective.
Service level objective and service level indicator. A service level objective is basically what do we want to make sure that we are doing? You know, we want to make sure that our service is available 99.95% of the time. We want to make sure that our API is, responding at, rates of better than 200 milliseconds for a response, at least 99% of the time, right? Like, and then that percentage is over a certain amount of time based on math, which I'm not great at. And so a service level indicator is how you measure whether or not you're meeting your objective. So if sometimes that's one-to-one, the indicator might be the objective, and sometimes that's not.
Gotcha. Yeah, I heard you say SLO earlier, and I'm like, I think it's objective, but I wasn't
service level objective. So some SRE teams go only as far as caring about service level objective. There's another layer. It's a service level agreement, and that's actually the contract that involves like real money with end customers. Since my team is an SRE team for workload or for services that are available to end Red Hat customers, we also have to care about our SLA. So I have to be aware of what all of those things are for a service, and be able to kind of keep that in mind. And we use things like Grafana dashboards to keep track of that, and the Red Hat Observatorium stack, which I don't know if that means anything to anybody outside myself, and I don't even think I have enough time on this stream to explain that. But basically, it's where we aggregate data around alerting and indicators that tell us, what is our error budget, how close are we meeting our objectives, are we at risk of not meeting our objectives, and then of course you have to know how does your objective actually map back to the SLA. I always recommend that you should aim to do better than what you've promised, right? So if my agreement is I'm providing you 3 nines of uptime, I should be aiming on my own internal side, objective sides, for 3.5 nines, right? To make sure that by the time my pager goes off, I should be able to get in and fix it before the customer notices there was a problem, not because we've breached our agreements.
Gotcha. So how much, like, not the other SRE teams, I'm sure they're probably doing their own thing, but like how much is your team using GitOps to onboard and maintain and, essentially remove customers, I guess, when they fall out of contract or whatever? Like how are you using the tools to do all that?
Right. So my team is actually interested in an interesting space. We don't own any of the GitOps infrastructure, but we have to use it. That the other teams use. So we have to understand what it does and what is where. So when we say we onboard a customer, let's talk about what a customer means for my team, right? A customer is both the Red Hat end customer using the service and the tenant engineering team offering the managed service, right? I have to make sure that I'm kind of taking care of both groups, right? And they have very separate interests and very different things that they need from me. So if I'm offboarding a customer, typically a Red Hat customer, I don't really know if they come and go, truthfully. All of the ingress and egress of end customers is handled through the OpenShift dedicated and add-on or managed service flows. So that's pretty good. I don't have to do anything like that. But if I did need to offboard a tenant, then yes, there are some GitOps files that I have to go and adjust and get rid of some things. And similarly, though, when we add a tenant, there's some GitOps, there's some files that we go and we add to kind of create the definitions. They do a lot of it themselves. We do some other pieces, and then we work through. Again, I say that we have very specific RBAC. So we actually define when we're defining our access based on the presence of this managed service, right? Because I can only access the fleet that has the managed services I care about because it's restricted RBAC. I also have to define what my expected actions are going to be. Can I delete things in namespaces here, right? Typically, no. So that's what we do. And then if we're offboarding, then we actually go through and we actually simply just remove or deprecate all those access files. We also do some configuration changes as part of our management of our services. So if we need to add, for example, there's some parts of a service that requires a persistent volume. And if we need to increase the size of that persistent volume, we actually can do that with GitOps. Similarly, if we needed, I don't think we would ever decrease it, but should we theoretically need to decrease it, we could do the same.
Gotcha. That's pretty awesome.
It's it's a lot of moving parts. I will say this to manage this. And again, we never know what size our fleet is. So having all of these very highly standardized ways and then the rigorous onboarding process to make sure that things are standardized, it kind of doesn't matter what people are doing with their implementation of that managed service. I don't have to care. I know the topology of that managed service on the OpenShift dedicated cluster. I know the way the components interact. I know the boundaries of those interactions, and I know how to go in and debug that and potentially solve an issue. So a really great example of this is a tenant engineering team missed a readiness probe alert on certain pods within their workload. We actually do reviews on these things too. So, we missed it too, right? Both sides missed it. Just happens. These things happen. We're human. So I got an alert on a weekend for a component, and when I go and I log in and I take a look at the end customer's cluster and I look at the component, I'm like, this is healthy. There's nothing wrong here. And the alert self-resolves. Okay, so that happened all in around 5 minutes. Typical response time must be within 15 minutes. So I'm already I'm well ahead of my potential risks of error budget. So I go ahead and I'm looking at general cluster health at this point. I'm checking to make sure, is there anything weird with the API server which would cause this component to show as unavailable? Am I, is there any potential capacity issues with etcd? And all of that is looking good, right? Okay, so things, these are liveness probes. They do go out and kind of through the internet. It could have just been a DNS error, right? Or a little blip in networking. So I'm going to go ahead and sign out of the cluster at this point when the alert fires again. Okay. So that's not a blip. There's something real. Where, what is this real thing that could be happening? So this is where the debugging comes in, where you start tracing through the interactions of all the components. Mm-hmm. And since everything is operator based, right? I go up to the operator through the operators, and I start looking at the operators that manage various things. And I finally find an error message about a readiness of certain pods, not, that they're failing. And I'm like, oh, they're not even in the same namespace as the component I'm getting alerted on, right? Well, it turns out the liveness probes requires going through, it's an SSO authentication implementation. So it requires authenticating to that to finish the liveness probe. So it wasn't finishing the loop. It would occasionally finish the loop because one of the pods was up and then down and then up and then down. The other pod was never coming online. So, so what we did, and in this case, we did an OC, rollout restart of the stateful set of the pods that brought them both back up, right? Mm-hmm. So in this case, then what we do is we file an RFE with engineering. Please add this liveness probe. We make a root cause analysis document in RCA that says this is what happened and why it happened, and this is what we learned and what we found out. And so we're continuously improving the process of our, and including improving the services that we run by opening RFEs whenever something happens in production.
So then with something like that, do you do a postmortem with the customer as well and say, hey, here's what we found, here's the scoop, here's the outputs that we got out of this? So
when the customer is actually impacted, yes. Okay. Theoretically, this customer could have been impacted, but we were still well within our our budget, right? Because like I said, remember, I always have at least 15 minutes to respond to alert, and I responded the first time in under 5. So we were so well within our error budget that I was able to fix those pods by re-rolling that stateful set, basically. We did do an RCA. If the customer ever said, hey, we noticed this, we would have been immediately able to present it. But I mean, we're talking, it was done so fast. And technically, most of their service wasn't down, right? It was just one little SSO authentication piece. So overall, like their actual like mission critical workloads were all fine. It was this one authentication piece used for literally this one thing. It was literally just used for the health check. Honestly, is how low impact that was. Had their entire service been down for 5 minutes, we would have opened a proactive case with them and sent them the RCA.
Nice. So you're talking earlier about creating an Ansible operator for part of your chaos engineering and stuff like that. But like, do you plan on using the operator for more of your SRE action type things, or is it really just going to be to essentially arm your next batch of engineers?
It's really to arm the next batch of engineers. Oh, we do have automation. It's actually GitOps adjacent automation that we can use to resolve alerts on production clusters. But Red Hat, we're very highly regulated in how we access production workloads. So you can automate that. And like I said, we're not allowed to spend customer compute. So we do have to manually authenticate before we can kick off that automation.
Gotcha. This R-Hope9 is saying that his favorite graphic or his favorite dashboard is the SLA Grafana, or the SLA dashboard in Grafana as part of the observatory and Rackham.
Yes, so that's the observatory piece I was missing. The answer is yes. We have similar and otherwise related dashboards that we use. No, I don't. Well, so yes and no. Everything that Red Hat does, right, we open source it. So if you want to go look at Red Hat OpenShift streams for Apache Kafka, that's open sourced. I'm pretty sure the Grafana pieces are part of that open source offering, right? But I don't know like how useful that would be for you. So typically on top of the cluster, the cluster specific Grafana dashboard, we're looking at dashboards that have been specifically designed for the managed services that we're offering. And unless you're running the open source version of the managed service, I don't know that those boards are going to be super useful to you. Typically, though, one of the things that we look at a characteristic of the board is that we have kind of a holistic view of typically an SLO, our SLOs are measured over like 28 days, like how many out of these 28 days period, like how often have we been on target? And so that's kind of a rolling 28 days. And so if you kind of go back a day and it changes the time period, it may or may not change your SLO depending on what your alerts were there. So that's a really nice feature of some of our boards. And I don't actually know off the top of my hand if the Advanced Cluster Manager board Grafana has anything similar. But if you're designing a board and you're caring about SLOs, kind of watching your SLOs not through like strict time boxed windows, but through rolling time boxes is a really nice way to get a really good holistic idea of how your service is performing.
Yeah, and then using like Prometheus as a data source, right? And then whatever other inputs that you have that you could put into a dashboard, right? You could essentially create the one that you need that actually fits what you need, right? So
most of our, I mean, pretty much any Prometheus event is being captured in a Grafana dashboard for us, which is not the only type of thing you can capture in Grafana, of course, but it's very useful for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually reading about dashboards, and it's like the one thing that Grafana they kept saying on its site and its best practices was make sure that the dashboard is telling the story that you want to hear. So like don't have all of this like extraneous data on this thing. Right? Don't include everything. And your 3 a.m. test, right, where if you have to go look at it at 3 a.m. and you're like, what am I looking at?
Yeah,
it's too much at that point. So
exactly, it's actually better to have like logically broken down dashboards, so smaller dashboards. So like I said, the SLO dashboard is a different dashboard than it's like an overall SLO is like a different dashboard than the like there's a dashboard that can show me how many Kafka instances exist, right? That's a really useful dashboard during some debugging sessions, and I don't really care about our aggregate SLO during that time. So these are of course separate dashboards. And of course, bookmarks are your friend. I bookmark the ones I need.
Always. So Dwayne had asked, is is there any way to better prepare for chaos engineering learning?
I'm not sure. I'm going to answer this question, but I'm not sure I'm answering it the way you're intending. So like I said, I kind of took my model for chaos engineering based off of some capture the flag games. So if you've never done something like that before, I would say go get involved in a capture the flag game. You're going to really learn things you've never had to learn. You're going to have to look up things that you would have never necessarily thought to look up. And so playing some capture the flag games is a really great way to kind of get used to the concept of responding to utter chaos, like something I'm never going to expect. That's what I modeled my games off of. There are Chaos Monkey that Christian mentioned is a really great tool that a lot of places use. We decided to do something homegrown for various reasons. And part of it is also just like the nature of our workloads. So that was maybe the answer you wanted. Feel free to clarify.
So Dwayne was on the Asking OpenShift admin and yesterday, right? And so he's learning. He's trying to get his feet wet and trying to like dive into a bunch of things. So I can see where he's going with this. Yeah, I think you probably tackled it pretty well.
Okay, cool. I will say like we are working on. So there's an initiative at Red Hat called Operate First. And Operate First, you're gonna hear my clickety clackety keyboard in a second here. Operate First is really cool because we're working on there we go. We're working on open sourcing trainings for basically like SRE and general operations and so forth. And I will give this to Stephanie to put into the chat. And is it show off my keyboard? No. Someday I will show off my rainbow LED keyboard, but not today. So we will be pushing actually an open source version of the chaos engineering game that we call affectionately internally called Combat. That's my version. We'll be pushing an open source version of that hopefully sometime this year, maybe next year. So we're working on open sourcing what we consider our best practices at Red Hat. And so Operate First is a good, like, keep an eye on it. You'll see them on Twitter too. You should definitely follow them on Twitter. And the folks at Red Hat who are running Operate First are super fantastic.
So is Operate First is the data science thing, right? Or is that just like one part of it?
There's just one part of it.
Okay. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, there's something called SRE University that I've been working on for like the last year, which is like an open source like SRE training and a self-assessment. Like, what do I need to learn in order to round myself out to be an SRE? Those are some efforts that I'm involved in that will eventually be showing up on the Operate First cloud.
Oh, that is awesome. So, G Kumar had asked. Well, he mentioned looking into Gremlin for chaos engineering. Are you aware of like?
Yeah, I'm aware of it. It's just again we decided to go with a homegrown solution for a variety of reasons.
Gotcha.
And one of those is because if we're doing this in Ansible, then we can make an operator and makes our lives a little bit better. It also forces us to have better domain knowledge on the types of technologies we support. Because learning operators is actually very interesting. I mean, they're very similar to like a standard like Linux daemon. Like if you're familiar with that concept, an operator makes a lot of sense. But the way it watches things, how many things it watches, how operator-based workloads scale, what makes for a good operator, what is the purpose of operators, which is to pretend to be human. Getting a little bit closer to that through our implementation of chaos engineering was a little bit important because of the way it forces the SRE team to, again, sort of eat our own dog food.
Yeah. I think conceptually operators have always made sense to me, but like when I jumped in like the SDK trying to write one, I was like, I should not have started with Go. So I was trying to like back out and go do something different. Like Helm seems like it's a little bit easier, and obviously Ansible is a lot easier since I'm familiar with it. So
yeah, no, and so truthfully, there's the you can start with Helm charts and then do a Helm operator. Some automation there. We recently tried it on my own team and actually didn't work perfectly. So you still have to do some copy paste efforts. And at the point you're doing those kind of copy paste efforts, the operator SDK is Ansible under the hood, right? That's all it is. It is Ansible. So just work with it as Ansible directly, and you'll be fine. if you really feel the need to go to a Golang operator for reasons at some point, it's not an impossible transition.
Yeah, and Dan Messner, like if you guys don't know who Dan Messner is, he's I think he's a product manager for Quay, but he used to be part of the Operator SDK. I think they're working on like a hybrid operator where you can work on like one language and then move over. You can start in Go and then go to Helm, or start in Helm and then move to Go, or actually have a combination of both in the same operator, which will be super nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, it's all Ansible under the hood. There's not really a reason why not. I think there's also, I remember seeing a Python operator SDK that's, I don't think is actually put out by Red Hat. I think somebody just put it out. I would imagine that works.
See, I could actually see that being pretty popular too, right? Especially with all the data science stuff. And I mean, yeah, I could see that being really popular with those guys.
Yeah, I could as well. So, and I like Python. I know Python. It's solid. Definitely doesn't have the same dependency management stress that Golang will give you. But yeah, as Christian says, the Golang operator SDK is easy once you get it.
Yeah, that's the part though. Is you have to get it. It takes some time to wrap your head around it.
Yeah, it does. It really does. So my team is, I love my team. I have extremely talented individuals. Like I said, I'm a global tech lead for about 10 people. It's going up. We're getting some more folks as well. So but we have a mixture on our team, and part of it is just the history of our team. About 50% of my team comes from an ops background, and 50% of my team comes from an engineering background. So when I'm making decisions on like what technologies we're going to use, I'm trying to make sure that we're sticking with technologies that we can all contribute to. And so Ansible and Ansible operators for us was a good decision.
Nice. Yeah, I was going to ask that about that. Is your team mostly like, software engineers, or is it something else? Because something else I was reading was saying that generally an SRE team is software engineers, but then that's really like a vanilla statement, right? Because software engineering isn't necessarily writing code. It's really solving problems, right? It doesn't mean that you're writing a program to do something, but
exactly.
Yeah.
So I've talked to I've talked to SREs at Google. The way they do it over there is they typically, the way they told me they do it. Let me make sure I represent that correctly. The way they told me they do it over there is that they have about an 80-20 split, 80% people with software development background and 20% people with pure operational background with maybe some scripting. And it a little bit depends on the team, what kind of split you're realistically going to have in terms of skills. There are SRE teams at Red Hat that are way just full on. Everybody here has a software engineering background. And there are teams at Red Hat that look more like ours, that more like 50-50 split. And there's various kind of ways that can kind of all come down. And a little bit comes down to what's the team really working on? What do they need to be doing? What are their chief considerations? And that's kind of what they're going to hire for. At the end of the day, though, everybody that is hired needs to feel comfortable doing operational tasks. Like we all have to understand operations.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's awesome. So G. Kumar just asked, is Red Hat planning to have some secrets management solution for OCP, like an enterprise version?
No comment.
Fair.
Sorry.
No, that's a huge pain point. Yes.
I'm not even in a position of authority, even when I do know things, to say the things that I know. That can get me in trouble. I have to say no comment. I cannot speak to the Red Hat strategy. I'm just an SRE. They don't let me out of my cave.
Yeah, I'm just a nerd. I sit in the corner and write Helm charts. So
yeah, that's exactly it. So yeah, I don't remember if there was anything I forgot to talk about that I wanted to talk about today.
Well, I mean, so we were talking a little bit about like as you're I lost my train of thought there.
I know, right?
I think early on, there was something early on that you had mentioned that I'm trying to go back to, and I can't think of it right now. Oh yeah. So as your team is it sounds like your team is pretty mature, right? But if there was another team coming on, how do you take what you know now, right? As far as GitOps and using Argo CD and using CICD tools and stuff like that. How would you onboard a brand new SRE team other than the chaos engineering, right? To get into this flow of, all right, don't ever let me catch you on the cluster hand jamming something out. I will slap your hand in front of everybody if I catch you doing this. Like, how do you get to that point?
You know what? Bringing up an entire team is a very different question than bringing up individuals. And not myself, but there is a team that has been being brought up more recently than mine. And they just experienced like all of the pain points you were saying, right? So the first off is, again, everybody's RBAC is very restricted. So that's really helpful because it makes sure that as a team, we're sticking to the things that we're supposed to stick to in terms of our allowed actions. If we, for whatever reason, must go outside of our bounds and break glass, there is paperwork. We have to do paper. There is paperwork involved in that, right? That will get logged, that will get flagged by ProdSec, that will get, somebody is going to come knock on my door. What did you do? We can see what you did. Why did you do it? Why was it important? Why was it justified? You have to give us all these things because we need to keep it in case the customers need it, right? So there's just kind of some fundamental training that we put everybody through of like, this is what your RBAC is. This is why your RBAC is. This is the importance of the security. This is, blah, blah, blah. And of course, we all have done these extensive background checks that prove that, we're likely to be good to be trusted. Of course, can never promise that 100%, but the background checks are very thorough. So we feel reasonably confident in saying that everybody on our SRE team can be trusted. From there, it's actually the way we've done it is they sent somebody who was incredibly senior over with the new manager for the new team as the technical lead to help build up the team. As this was a person with a lot of experience, not just not just in SRE, but at Red Hat as a whole. And so he's one of the other global technical leads. He's a peer of mine. We talk all the time. Like way smarter than I am, I swear. And so that's basically what happened. And so the way Red Hat does their management structure, I think is really key for why this is kind of able to work. At least in the SRE group, our technical managers, like our engineering managers, aren't actually managing the tech, right? They're managing the people, their career paths, making sure that they're, accomplishing certain things they're supposed to accomplish, keeping on like the performance and development, raises, salaries, bonuses, all of those considerations. What they're not making decisions on are technical decisions. That is the job of the technical lead. So as my job as the technical lead, I'm the person I have the final say in the technical decisions for my team. I keep us on the path towards the Northern Star. I keep us aligned with the greater organization as a whole. And all of that technical management is done through the technical leads. And then we're informing the managers of what's going on. We're, keeping everybody apprised of like, this is our project's work. This is how it's going to be worked. This is how it needs to be broken up. And then ideally the managers and the technical leads on like a regional level, right? I'm global and I have 4 geographic regions. So on a regional level, then they sit down and they figure out who on the team is going to actually do the implementation pieces. So like for me, I have to do a lot of the technical scoping. So that's a big part of the way that a new SRE team would probably be brought up again. If we've talked about the strategy, how do we scale, right? How do you scale SRE, right? We've talked about this a lot. You can only scale each team up so far before you have to start making new teams. And so actually what you would be doing is you would be taking very senior people ready for advancement over to become the technical leadership on those teams so that they can train and upskill newer people. And then the way you hire is you try to hire a balance of people who have some previous level of experience and people who have no experience and they're very fresh so that you can kind of get them used to doing things your way from day one. And
Gotcha.
so that was how they did it. That team, by the way, is extremely awesome. I can't say, you heard me say really great things about their lead because I do think very highly of him, but that entire SRE team, I think, is absolutely just fantastic. They're doing really cool things.
That's awesome. And it's good to have pain points like that too, right? Because you learn as a group, you learn how you work as a team, right? And you learn like, okay, this is what it's like when it sucks. Like I need to remember this feeling so that way we don't get back here. And then you just keep growing from there, So I think that it's the growing pains or the good pains of being new.
Yeah. And so the thing is what we're not doing is it's not one SRE team per service. It's one SRE team per many services. So we're also constantly trying to calculate what is our team's capacity to take on new services, to take on new tooling, to take on new technical debt. And that's why we have the layered products SRE team is a group called SREs or SRE services. And so, like I said, so there's 3 technical leads, 3 functional teams with like sort of, I guess you'll say, specializations in terms of the managed services that they run. And one of the biggest things what we're doing is trying to make sure when we're scaling that we're scaling in a way that allows us to almost step into each other's shoes. So the way that we're doing onboardings, we're trying to make that extremely uniform across all the teams. So everybody's making some changes. There's an initiative that I actually just published the first slide deck for, is the disaster planning office hours. I think I mentioned it earlier, where anybody from our team can go and present the slide deck. It has a bunch of RCAs. They're not just allowed to present their own team's RCAs, they have to present from all of the teams to prospective tenants to help them learn about disasters and start thinking through their own disaster planning and strategies on how do they want their service handled during a problem, during a catastrophic incident where data could be lost or so forth. Or, an Amazon region is down. That actually happened at the end of last year. So we're doing these things, and we're trying to do them very, very together. And that's another part where the synchronization between the technical leadership and the management is really important, because keeping everybody on the path to the Northern Star in the same way is also a process thing, which is a lot of a people manager thing. And of course, that's where our project managers and program managers also really save us, because they keep us, like I say, they keep us honest.
Yeah, in organizational maturity, it's definitely it's valuable, right? So it's awesome. So Jukumar just asked, what's a must-have skill for someone to start as an SRE engineer?
Your most important skill is your ability to manage your stress, because you're going to hit things that can be very stressful as an SRE. They're going to be impacting live customers. They might even have revenue consequences. And you can't really let those things get through. You have to be able to manage your stress, hit a zen, and just get into the problem and solve it as best you can, not without panicking. Please don't panic. And that's really the most important thing, because you can be an amazing engineer, but if you don't know how to manage your stress, you're going to hate SRE, where you're going to hate production support. I like to say that people who are the most successful SREs are like the adrenaline junkies of the software engineering world. It's like, oh, you want to wake me up at 3 a.m. and my pager's going off and it's 20 clusters and I can't tell what's going on? Yes, let's do it. If that is not your response to that scenario, you probably don't want to be an SRE.
I can't say I would want to be woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Pretty sure that'd be a hard no.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been woken up at weird times. That's the responsibility of the pager. But the idea about being a globally distributed SRE team is that we are, typically speaking, there's somebody awake when something happens. So getting woken up at 3 a.m. is very rare.
Well, I'm a bougie, crotchety old man now, so I can't be woken up too early. So
you would not like my job. My job is I'm in California, and my first meeting is at 7 a.m. every day. Sometimes the other day I woke up and I had 4 7 a.m. meetings scheduled of equal importance.
Yeah, they're just picking on you.
They're just picking on me.
You made somebody mad.
So when I get to our Hope Nine's question about we don't take responsibility for customer backups, that's not exactly accurate. So there's a degree. So basically, within the OpenShift dedicated ecosystem itself, for example, if you have one of the layered products has RDS instances, Postgres, Redis, and those have a backup cycle. And if there's anything that fails with that backup cycle, we would go in and actually fix it and solve that. And but it's basically they should be backing things up outside of OpenShift itself, because if data centers start burning down, right, like there's only so far that our backups can go. So that we basically tell them, like, look, we're going to make best effort to keep your data safe and continuous in OpenShift dedicated itself, but there's a lot of the layered products, but it's sort of remember that things can happen, things can go wrong. We can never promise 100% because we don't control AWS or GCP or anything else, right? We don't control DNS. So even if your data is there, but you can't get it and you need it, you should have something somewhere else if you can, right? So these types of things. Data loss is very, very uncommon. I am aware of some situations where the platform SRE team has had to restore clusters from backups, but those backups do exist. They just are there. There's the potential for them to be imperfect, right? Because the backup is from the point of time of the backup, not necessarily the point of time of the failure. Mm-hmm. So customers should always use their best judgment. You should always have multiple layers of redundancy. That's just really best practices in general. And so so again, if it's a layered product that has an RDS instance, there is a backup process in there. OpenShift itself has backup processes. If anything fails with those backup processes, SRE will go in and do those backup processes to make sure those backups exist. But again, DNS happens, then you're not going to have access to your data until DNS is restored. And these things do happen. They've happened. I've been at Red Hat a year and a half, and I have seen major DNS outages 3 times. So they absolutely happen.
Oh yeah.
I think, did I answer that question satisfactorily? So yeah, when we say that, when I was talking earlier about the service that didn't have data continuity planned, this was not, this was ephemeral data in a persistent volume, not something that's actually put into truly persistent storage, in that it's an RDS instance or an S3 bucket or some kind of database that actually, has the ability to stick around a little bit better.
So do you set up log forwarding? So if you have a customer that wants to offload their apps or offload their logs out of the cluster, right? Do you help them set that up, or is that something that they would have to do on their own? They would set up the forwarders so that way it just kind of dumps everything out?
So they'd have to do it on their own. They can there's typically like consulting who can help actually do the, that kind of pieces for them. That's not really an SRE thing.
Gotcha.
Customers need to manage their own workloads. We're going to manage OpenShift, the opinionated portions of OpenShift, and we're going to manage the layered products. But if they want log forwarding or anything like that from their workloads, they're going to need to do that. Now, we do have log forwarding for our opinionated pieces. And so we do have CloudWatch and FluentD in place, pulling some stuff out, and some other tools to get error and exception handling as well. So we do have logs. And again, everything SRE does is audited and logged. So if I log into a cluster and I'm doing things, that is also getting logged and forwarded, because everything we do is auditable.
Gotcha. Oh, so that's really the clear line then. It's basically like you'll up to the layered application, then the customer app. That's the line in the sand where customer support and Red Hat support.
Correct.
Or Red Hat SRE.
Yes, exactly. So, and then again, it depends a little bit on the SRE team, right? So the platform SRE team, they typically try to be hands-off customer workloads. That's policy. If there's really something going wrong, the customer doesn't understand, they may, out of kindness of their hearts, help them out a little bit there. Typically speaking, though, anything that the customer is doing or installing on their cluster that's not a Red Hat managed service or part of the managed OpenShift layer itself, we are hands-off.
Gotcha.
But CEE is also great, and CEE can help customers and has some visibility as well. So, customers can get support from Red Hat from non-SRE avenues. There's plenty of avenues to get support if you're a customer that is not SRE.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think all the questions, I think we answered all of them. Christian said that there should be an episode on Helm charts for power users. That would actually be a cool episode.
Oh man, I'm not a Helm chart power user.
I'm like a Helm chart weak user. I can actually write. I can do some pretty cool stuff with the templating, but
yeah, I know somebody. I could maybe convince one of the other people within SREs. One of the other global leads used to be a Helm maintainer, and he's like blogged about Helm, and I would call him a Helm power user. I might could convince him to come on for an episode like that, but we'd have to have it at a different time because he's in Israel. So
yeah,
maybe, but he's really busy.
Yeah, there's a couple dudes here that actually wrote a book on Helm. So Andy Block wrote the book on Helm.
Oh, and then, of course.
Austin Dewey, I think is his name. I can't remember. But those two guys, they wrote. Yeah, that'd be fun to have them on, because they're.
Yeah, I know Andrew Block. We could ask him. I like that we're talking about him like he's going to agree to come on this. That guy's traveling all over the world, and he's also going to find time for this stream. Maybe
I've already approved his calendar for it, so it's good.
It's fantastic. It's a done deal. I hope Andrew sees this. Let's not tag him in anything.
Yeah. Just let him find out through the rumor.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody tell him. I'm just going to send him the invite quietly. He's not going to know what he's walking into.
So the names of the Helm book, honestly, I think it's like Learning Helm. It's a packed book, PACKT. I think it's actually like Learning Helm is what it's called. Andrew Block is the author, and Austin Dewey, I believe, is the co-author. Or maybe they both have individual books. And then rhope9 said something about like backups are all, yes, backups are definitely important, but testing and restoring is probably more important than the actual backup itself. Did you want to chime in on that a little bit, or?
Yeah.
I don't know. So
SRE does nothing without a SOP, without a standard operating procedure, right? We test the SOPs. we test every SOP as part of the onboarding process. We test the SOPs. So if anything changes with how those works, they get tested again. And we actually work with the quality engineering team to test our SOPs too. That way they're making sure that we're getting SOPs that make sense and work. And like I said, we can copy paste at 3 a.m.
Yeah, I like that. The 3 a.m. test. That's pretty nice.
We call it the 3 a.m. standard. I don't remember if I originated that, just started saying it. So either somebody said it and I started saying it, but now I say the 3 a.m. standard all the time. I'm pretty sure my first manager at Red Hat is the person who said called it the 3 a.m. standard. But yeah, it's the 3 a.m. standard. I'm not a smart human at 3 a.m. You don't want me making independent decisions at 3 a.m. You want to give me a SOP. Okay, so that said, we are top of the hour. Fun fact, Christian's killing me with that one. Oh, you knew better too. I know you.
I feel like there's a story to this.
I don't remember if I was around for when that happened, but so Christian and I worked together before Red Hat, and he did a lot of I guess he was the sysadmin, right? I always say SRE is not your sysadmin, right? He was the sysadmin, and so yeah, he was doing the backups. We did this really clever server rotation to promote to production, and was swapping DNS instead of actually promoting builds again. So like I know that he knew better on those backups. Like though he was both SRE and sysadmin. That's true. But we also had it was a database backup. We had a whole database administrator. Wasn't he doing that? That was his whole job. Okay, whatever. This was 10 years ago. We're not digging into this.
I feel like we're blaming Christian for this. I feel like this was Christian's fault. So
yeah, apparently it is his fault because he said it is his fault, but never mind. Anyway, my mind is a little bit blown. Shame on you. You knew better. And so that said, we are at the top of the hour. Just like I'm still working on my greeting, I'm kind of still working on my exit, my catchphrase, right? You know, Christian always said if it's not in Git, it's always only a rumor. I'm going to go ahead and just remind you to choose your technical debt wisely because SRE will remind you that you need to pay it. I think that's it for us. Bye, folks.
see you later.
I'll wave at you until Stephanie is able to end the stream.
Just hang up.